Welcome to the Alpha and Omega and segment, What About Israel?
Imagine you're watching the nightly news, right?
Okay.
But instead of seeing politicians fighting over borders, you see angels, demons, and like the literal unfolding of a 3,000-year-old prophecy.
Wow. Yeah, that is a completely different way to watch the news.
Exactly. And for millions of people across the globe, that isn't just a metaphor. That is the exact lens through which they are viewing the current war in the Middle East.
Right. It's their literal reality.
Yeah. So today we are taking you deep into that specific worldview. We're looking at a Christian eschatological, which, just means end times document. And this document interprets the modern conflict not through treaties or statecraft, but as this immutable cosmic mandate.
It really just completely throws out the standard political map, doesn't it?
Oh, totally.
Because when we look at global news, we generally expect tangible mechanics. An action happens, a reaction follows. You analyze economic sanctions or historical land disputes.
Right, the usual stuff.
Yeah. Exactly. But this document argues that trying to understand the Middle East through purely secular politics is, well, it's like trying to measure temperature with a ruler.
That's a great way to put it.
You're just using the wrong tool for the reality of this situation.
Our goal today is to neutrally unpack this specific document.
Exactly.
We want you to understand the internal logic of this massive demographic.
Because, whether you agree with it or not, this theology influences how millions of people vote.
Oh, yeah. How they lobby. How billions of dollars in foreign aid are distributed.
That is the crucial context for you as a listener. We're exploring the what, the how, and most importantly, the why behind their arguments.
Right.
We're mapping out how they connect ancient scripture to today's headlines to shape very real geopolitical power.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the document doesn't start in the ancient past. It starts right in the visceral, immediate present.
Right, October 7th.
Exactly. It addresses the October 7th attacks directly. And don't just call it a military or terrorist assault. The language used is demonic.
Demonic, wow.
Yeah. Describe it as an unprovoked, sadistic attack by Hamas. And that specific vocabulary does a lot of heavy lifting.
It really does. Framing the attack as demonic immediately elevates the conflict beyond just the human realm.
Right, it's a supernatural thing now.
Establishing that all human beings are pulling the triggers, there is a supernatural architecture dictating the violence. But they also ground this spiritual argument in very specific earthly claims about Hamas's tactics.
Right.
The text asserts that Hamas operates as a barbaric death cult. They explicitly accuse them of maximizing civilian casualties by using innocent people as human shields.
And the document goes into painstaking detail about the misuse of international aid, too.
Yeah, the money stuff.
Right. Claiming that billions of dollars sent by the global community to help the people in Gaza were hijacked.
And used for what, according to the text?
Well, the authors state that Hamas used this money to build a vast network of terror tunnels underneath Israeli soil.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and allege that infrastructure pipes, like pipes originally meant to deliver fresh drinking water, were literally dug up and converted into missiles.
Building on those specific claims, the document then constructs its case for Israel's military response.
Right. What's their main argument there?
The text argues that any sovereign nation possesses the logical and human right to defend itself against such an assault.
Sure, that makes sense.
And to support this, they point to a historical pattern. They claim that in every major war since 1948, Israel has been the attacked party, the target of aggression.
And that they've won every time.
Exactly. They've managed to win every time. So in view, the current retaliation is simply a continuation of a necessary defensive posture.
Right. But then they express this immense, palpable frustration.
Oh, definitely. You can really feel it in the text.
Because despite what they present as a clear-cut case of self-defense against terrorism, the source alleges that the global media has completely inverted reality.
Yeah.
The media falsely paints Israel as the bully of the Middle East, labeling them as colonial occupiers and accusing them of committing genocide.
And the document views this narrative not just as typical biased journalism, but as a patently untrue role reversal.
Right, like a complete flip.
Exactly. The complete disconnect between their understanding of the facts on the ground, which they describe as Israel fighting a highly surgical war against a terrorist organization hiding behind its own citizens, and the massive global outcry against Israel.
It's like, if we treat global politics like a chess game, the authors of this document aren't just looking at the pieces on the board,
No, not at all.
claiming there's a spiritual entity actively moving the hands of the players. The text points out that this global narrative shifted against Israel almost instantly.
How instantly are we talking?
They claim the condemnation started just 12 minutes after the October 7th attacks began.
12 minutes. Wow.
Yeah, and I have to wonder how the text rationalizes such a rapid, massive shift in public opinion. Like, a geopolitical conflict doesn't just instantly rebrand itself globally without some underlying mechanism.
What's fascinating here is how the text links that immediate media backlash directly to a rise in global anti-Semitism. They frame the entire shift as a supernatural phenomenon. The authors argue that the sudden, intense hatred for Israel defies earthly logic, especially, in a post-Holocaust world.
Right, so it has to be spiritual.
Exactly. Therefore, they conclude the mechanism driving it must be spiritual blinding. The enemy, meaning Satan, is spinning the global narrative to turn the world against the Jewish people.
So it's not even a political debate?
No, it isn't viewed as a complex political disagreement over borders or proportional response. It is viewed as mass spiritual deception.
Okay, so if the world is caught in this spiritual deception, argues that Christians need to ardently support Israel.
Right.
But that brings up a glaring paradox that the text itself is forced to acknowledge.
The secular issue.
Yes. If supporting Israel is a holy imperative, like a divine mandate, how does the source staunchly demand support for a modern state where roughly 80% of the Jewish population is completely secular?
It's a huge sticking point.
They are not practicing the biblical religion described in the Old Testament. To an outsider, demanding religious devotion to a secular government seems, well, contradictory.
Yeah, and the authors actually spend a significant portion of the text addressing that exact tension.
Oh, really? How do they justify it?
The theological anchor to resolve this paradox is the Abrahamic covenant,
Okay.
which is detailed in the biblical book of Genesis, specifically chapters 12 through 17. Now, in ancient times, a covenant wasn't just a handshake agreement.
It's more serious than that.
It was an absolute binding treaty. And in this specific covenant, God promises the land of Canaan to Abraham and his descendants.
And the key detail the text emphasizes is that this covenant is entirely unconditional.
Unconditional, yes.
According to the source, God didn't attach behavioral clauses. He didn't say, I give you this land as long as you behave perfectly or, as long as you worship me correctly.
No strings attached.
Exactly. The promise is an everlasting, unbreakable chain linked directly to Abraham's physical descendants, completely, regardless of their spiritual state at any given moment in history.
And the text backs this up with a historical comparison, too.
Oh, right, with the kings.
Yeah, pointing out that during the times of the Old Testament, the ancient nation of Israel was frequently ruled by terrible leaders.
Just really bad kings.
Awful ones. The authors note that in the Northern Kingdom, you couldn't find a single good king. They were all pagan, worshipped idols, and actively defied God.
And the Southern Kingdom.
The Southern Kingdom, Judah, only had a handful of righteous ones. So the theological argument is that if the covenant only applied when Israel was perfectly godly, then the covenant never actually existed in practice.
Okay, so that historical precedent is the foundation for justifying their support of a modern secular government.
Exactly.
And the text even explicitly addresses pushback from modern conservative political commentators. Argue against supporting a secular, unbelieving nation. The document rejects their political logic entirely, stating that the original land covenant simply transcends current governmental morality.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's almost like the text is describing the Abrahamic covenant as an unbreakable trust fund.
A trust fund. Okay, explain that.
Think about a wealthy grandfather who sets up a massive trust fund for his descendants. It is legally binding.
Right.
Generations later, the beneficiary might be acting recklessly, ignoring the grandfather's ideals, living a totally secular life.
Yeah.
But the bank still has to honor the trust.
Because the contract is the contract.
The contract is the contract. Exactly.
I mean, I understand the trust fund logic.
Hey.
But practically, how does a theologian justify supporting a secular government in wartime without creating a terrifying moral hazard?
That's the big question.
Right. Does the text just excuse any wartime action as divinely sanctioned? Does Israel get a total blank check to do whatever it wants without any moral boundaries?
They're actually remarkably careful to address that potential moral hazard.
Oh, they are.
Yeah. The text explicitly states that they do not give Israel a blank check.
Okay, that's an important distinction.
Very important. They clarify that believers are not required to blindly cheer at everything the Israeli military or government does.
Right.
However, and this is the crucial nuance for their worldview, they maintain that the secular nature of the government, or even severe mistakes made in wartime, do not nullify God's historical promise regarding the land.
Ah, I see.
The trust fund remains legally intact, even if the creator of the trust disapproves of how the beneficiary is currently behaving.
Okay, that resolves the tension of the present for them. But if the covenant secures the land today, where is this all heading?
Right, the future.
Yeah, we need to move from the ancient past to the prophetic future. How does this document view the ultimate endgame of this conflict?
Well, Israel isn't just another nation in the Middle East.
What is it then?
It is the absolute epicenter of end times events. They believe that you mathematically cannot have the culmination of biblical prophecy without the Jewish people gathered back in that specific geographic location.
Even if they're secular.
Even if they're currently gathered in unbelief, yeah. The physical parameters of the prophecy require their presence in the land.
And they find proof of this impending endgame by mapping the daily news directly onto ancient texts.
It's fascinating to watch them do it.
It is. It is a psychological phenomenon, prophetic mapping,
Mm-hmm.
where the human brain is wired to find ancient patterns in modern chaos.
Mm-hmm.
The source cites the Old Testament book of Zechariah, chapter 12, and this prophesies that in the last days, the nations of the world will surround Jerusalem and lay siege to it.
And they connect that to today.
Yeah, the text provides a visceral modern example to prove this is happening right now.
Oh, the walkout.
Exactly. Multiple Arab and Islamic nations simply stood up and walked out of the room.
And the authors view that empty room at the UN as a literal modern fulfillment of Zechariah's prophecy.
A literal fulfillment. Wow.
Yeah. A diplomatic protest over human rights or geopolitics isn't just politics to them. It's a flashing prophetic marker.
I see.
And this brings us to the absolute highest stakes of the document's theology, the final judgment.
Okay.
The text breaks down a passage from the New Testament book of Matthew, chapter 25, which is often called the Olivet Discourse.
Let's pause here because we need to make sure we don't lose anyone in the theological jargon.
Good idea.
It talks a lot about the tribulation and the millennial kingdom. For listeners who didn't grow up in this specific church environment, are we talking about metaphors for general human suffering, or is this a literal timeline of events?
In this specific eschatological view, these are literal, impending historical events.
Literal events. Okay.
Yes. The tribulation refers to a future, horrific 7-year period of global suffering and divine judgment.
Wow. 7 years.
Yeah. And the millennial kingdom is what follows. It's a literal 1,000-year period where they believe Jesus Christ will physically rule the earth from Jerusalem in perfect peace.
Okay, so with that timeline in mind, the text outlines exactly how the authors believe people will be judged at the end of the world to determine who gets into that 1,000-year kingdom.
Right. The source claims that when Jesus returns bodily to earth, he will gather all the Gentile nations, meaning, all non-Jewish nations, in a valley outside Jerusalem to judge them.
Just to judge them.
Yeah. And according to the text, the primary metric for this judgment is based on a specific phrase Jesus uses in the Gospel of Matthew. It's how you treated these brothers of mine.
And they interpret these brothers of nine not as a general term for the poor or the marginalized.
No, not at all.
They interpret it very specifically as the Jewish people.
Yes. The document argues that during the future tribulation, Jewish people will be hunted down and persecuted globally on an unprecedented scale.
That's terrifying.
It is. Therefore, showing kindness to Jewish people during this horrific time, feeding them, clothing them, hiding them, much like the righteous Gentiles did during the Holocaust, is framed as the ultimate fruit of a Christian's salvation.
So it's proof of their faith.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They clarify that you don't earn your way to heaven by doing this, but rather, if you possess genuine faith, supporting Israel will be the natural, unavoidable evidence of that faith.
Which explains the causality of why the stakes are so unimaginably high for them right now.
It really does.
They see this current media narrative as the opening skirmish of a cosmic spiritual war. And the ultimate adversary, according to the text, is Satan.
Right.
The document claims that Satan, who they call the father of lies, is the one orchestrating all this global hatred and UN walkouts.
Yeah.
But we need to unpack the mechanism here. how does public opinion in 2026 affect a divine cosmic timeline?
Well, prophecy, in their view, requires specific physical conditions to be met on Earth before the spiritual endgame triggers. The text references the book of Romans, chapter 11, verse 26, claiming that eventually the Jewish people in the land of Israel will collectively call the Messiah back to Earth.
Okay.
When that happens, it completely ruins the plans of the Antichrist. Satan knows this. He knows the mathematical requirements of the prophecy.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. If he can use global media and foreign armies to wipe out the physical nation of Israel today, the Jewish people won't be in the land to call the Messiah back tomorrow.
So the prophecy can't be fulfilled.
Exactly. The prophecy cannot be fulfilled. So Satan is trying to destroy the earthly nation of Israel now to prevent the end of the spiritual story.
It is a sweeping, grand narrative.
It really is massive.
And the text even points to the imagery of the New Jerusalem at the very end of the Bible. It notes how the 12 gates of the heavenly city are named after the 12 tribes of Israel.
Uh-huh.
And the 12 foundation stones are named after the 12 Christian apostles.
The symbolism is heavy.
Yeah. To the authors, this represents the perfect, ultimate merger of the ancient nation of Israel and the Christian church, proving that God's plan for both has always been intertwined.
So what does this all mean?
Right, practically speaking.
We are talking about cosmic battle spanning millennia, the literal New Jerusalem descending, Satan orchestrating UN walkouts to break the mathematical requirements of prophecy.
It's a lot.
It is a lot. How does this massive theology trickle down into instructions for a regular college student or a mechanic or a person listening to this deep dive right now?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the text distills all this complex eschatology into a very specific, everyday call to action.
Okay, what is it?
The authors are clear that right now the church and the nation of Israel are two distinct entities. God has a specific plan for the church and a different, distinct program for Israel as a nation.
Which won't activate until the end times.
Right, exactly. But for the believer today, the mandate is clear. You must actively support Israel.
And the document lays out exactly what that earthly support looks like. It constructs 3 concrete pillars.
Okay, let's hear.
First, you must support Israel's right to exist as a sovereign nation.
Number 1, got it.
Second, you must support their right to defend themselves militarily.
Okay.
And third, you must support their right to be in that specific historical land bordered by the Mediterranean. That is the baseline demanded by the text.
Beyond the geopolitical support, there is a very human, relational component to their conclusion, too. For a follower of this text, anticipating the end of the world isn't just a source of anxiety. It is a lifestyle,
Yeah.
a community bond, and a subject worthy of a retreat. It dictates their media consumption, their political alliances, their community interactions, and yes, their vacation plans. It is a complete, all-encompassing lens for reality.
And that brings us right back to why we open this deep dive by talking about the nightly news.
Same.
You might be listening to this and thinking, well, I don't share this theology, so why should I care?
Right.
You should care because this worldview is a massive driver of modern geopolitics. The people who read this document and take it as literal truth are voting in elections. They are calling their representatives.
And they are shaping foreign policy based on the belief that a physical nation is required to trigger a divine return. When you understand that, the map of the Middle East looks entirely different. It's no longer just an equation of cause and effect, which leaves us with a lingering question, something for you to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
Okay.
When a geopolitical conflict is interpreted by millions of people, not as a dispute over earthly borders or human politics, but as the unfolding of an immutable cosmic prophecy, a spiritual battle where the outcome is already written in ancient text, how does that fundamentally change the way modern diplomacy, compromise, and peace negotiations can even operate?
It forces us to ask if a secular treaty can ever truly resolve a conflict that one side views as a divine mandate. It changes the very definition of what peace might look like.
Exactly. When the map you're using isn't political but prophetic, the destination changes entirely.
Thank you for joining us. You can hear the full deep dive in our digital archives.